In this PowerPoint, we'll be looking at operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is based on reinforcement and punishment, or consequence. We tend to associate operant conditioning with B.F. Skinner. However, E.L. Thorndike is the one who came up with the principle that operant conditioning is based upon. E.L. Thorndike came up with what's known as the law of effect. He recognized that if you reinforce or reward someone, a behavior will strengthen. If you punish them for an action, that behavior will decrease or diminish. B.F. Skinner is the one who built upon Thorndike's law of effect and came up with what's known as operant conditioning. His principle is based on Thorndike's law of effect. Skinner believed that reinforcement will also increase or strengthen a behavior, and punishment will decrease or diminish a behavior. Skinner used many types of animals to test his theory of operant conditioning. He used rats, he used pigeons, and as you can see in the picture below, he used what was called an operant chamber or Skinner box for many of his animals. Inside of the operant chamber or Skinner box, there was a lever that the animal could press so they could be reinforced with food. Basically, he was training his animals to perform particular tasks by reinforcing them with food, thus strengthening the behavior or increasing the behavior. If you have an animal that you have conditioned before, whether it's teaching them to sit or shake, and you give them food for performing the correct behavior, you are engaging in operant conditioning. So a reinforcer is anything that increases or strengthens a behavior, some type of reward. There are two types of reinforcers: positive reinforcer and negative reinforcer. As you can see, a positive reinforcement is adding something pleasant in order to strengthen a behavior. So if you have a young child and you would like them to clean their room, you may offer them a treat, cookies or ice cream, in order to get them to clean their room. Therefore, you're adding something pleasant. Another example, if you have an adolescent child and you want them to perform well on their report card, you could use money as a positive reinforcement for every A or B that they receive. A negative reinforcement is still intended to strengthen or increase a behavior and should not be confused with punishment. A negative reinforcer is the removal of something unpleasant. So if you want your child to clean their room, instead of offering a treat, you may say, if you clean your room, you won't have to do any chores this week. Coaches use this type of reinforcement. If you want your team to win on Friday night, you may say, if you win the game on Friday night, I will take away that unwanted Saturday morning practice, thus removing something unpleasant. First, I would like you to pause the video for a second, or the PowerPoint. Read all of the scenarios that you see on this slide and try to determine whether or not they are positive or negative reinforcement. First of all, putting a seatbelt on to avoid a buzzer. This would be negative reinforcement because you are removing something unpleasant. You are getting rid of that nagging, buzzing sound. Studying for a test to avoid a bad grade. Again, you are studying to avoid that grade. So you're trying to remove something unpleasant, which is, again, negative reinforcement. Having a headache and taking an aspirin. Many students often think this is positive reinforcement. However, you are not adding something pleasant. We do not take aspirin because we enjoy it. You're taking the aspirin to get rid of something unpleasant, the headache. Faking sick to avoid AP Psych class. Here again, you're not adding something pleasant, faking sick. You're acting that way to avoid something unpleasant, your AP Psych class, unless you're in my class. The final scenario, getting a kiss for doing the dishes. This is positive reinforcement. You're adding something pleasant, a kiss, unless it's that guy in the picture. Now I'd like you to click on the top title, Positive or Negative Reinforcement. This is a clip to The Big Bang Theory, and you will see Sheldon using positive reinforcement with Penny. Now we need to look at 4 schedules of reinforcement. The first schedule of reinforcement is a fixed ratio, or FR. This type of reinforcement gives a reward for a specific number of responses. For example, if you cut lawns, you may get paid for every lawn you cut. A car salesman may get paid for every car they sell. If you work in a factory, you may get paid for every 20 shirts that you make. That would be a fixed or a set number. The example at the bottom. A woman gets a manicure for every 5 pounds she loses. So that's a set number. The second type of reinforcement is a fixed interval, meaning a set or specified amount of time. A great example here would be a biweekly paycheck. You get paid every other Wednesday. So that is a set amount of time passing. Another example at the bottom, a woman gets a manicure for every 7 days she is on her diet, because days would be time instead of pounds, which was numbers from the previous slide. The third schedule of reinforcement is a variable ratio. So this is an unpredictable number. So you're reinforced or rewarded after an unpredictable number of responses. Best example here is a slot machine. Slot machines will pay out, but they are unpredictable or variable. So a person sits down and they push that button random amounts of times. After an unpredictable number of times that they push that button, it will pay out and they'll be reinforced. This is a very addictive schedule of reinforcement. The fourth schedule of reinforcement is a variable interval. So variable interval is an unpredictable amount of time. After an unpredictable amount of time passes, you will be reinforced or rewarded. One example here would be standing on a street corner waiting for a taxi cab. After an unpredictable amount of time passes, a cab will stop and pick you up. Pop quizzes fall under this schedule of reinforcement. Teachers who give pop quizzes, there will be an unpredictable amount of time will pass before they give that quiz. In addition to looking at reinforcement, Thorndike and Skinner also focused on punishment. Again, a punishment is meant to decrease a behavior or diminish a behavior. Here we have positive and negative punishment, just like we had positive and negative reinforcement. So positive punishment. You want to add something unpleasant to stop someone from doing something. So if a child does something wrong, a spanking on the behind would be a positive punishment. You're adding something unpleasant to stop the behavior. Giving a child a detention in school would be positive punishment. You're adding something unpleasant, that time in detention, to stop a behavior. If you are speeding and you get a speeding ticket, that is a positive punishment. You're adding something unpleasant, that unwanted fine, to stop that behavior. Negative punishment. You're removing something pleasant to stop a behavior. So if your child does something inappropriate, you may take away their favorite toy or their cell phone to stop that behavior. If you get caught speeding too many times, you may have your license revoked. So you're removing something pleasant, the ability to drive. Therefore, that is a negative punishment. If you're going to use a reinforcer, or a punishment for that matter, it has to be desired. It has to be important to the person. This is known as the Premack principle. For example, if I were going to use positive reinforcement with a young child for getting good grades, I may say to them, I will give you a sticker for every A or B you get. That may work with a kindergarten child, but it will not work with an adolescent. You would have to use something like money or something that's important to them. That is the Premack principle. A token economy is a form of operant conditioning. A token economy is a form of operant conditioning where someone gets a symbol, a star, or a check mark for every time that they perform an appropriate behavior. Those check marks or stars or symbols can accumulate. And after so many that has been predetermined, they can cash them in for a prize. This is a type of behavior modification. So a child in kindergarten may have a treasure box, and they get a check mark for appropriate behavior Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. They can then get a prize out of the treasure box on Friday. Another type of operant conditioning is called shaping. This is reinforcing in small steps and guiding someone into a desired behavior. The example I've listed, if you want to teach a young child to write their name, instead of waiting until they can write their whole name to give them a reinforcer, a reward, you might want to encourage them along the way. Reinforcing small steps. For example, you could give them a reward, a reinforcer, for each letter that they write. And this will give them the encouragement they need in order to write their full name.